what I love to do is make feature-length films, and that's why I'm here. So I'm here as a guest of the United States Embassy, and I've had a wonderful week screening the film and meeting documentary filmmakers and artists here. I'm just curious, is anybody in the audience seeing the overnighters at the screening? Okay, so that's okay. That's all right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the making of that film, and before I do that, I'm not going to show you the film because it's 100 minutes long, but I'm going to show you the trailer, and then I want to talk about what I do, which is independent filmmaking. So I have a film and television production company. It's a pretty small company. I am partners with my wife, and we make feature-length documentary films. We make television documentary. I do some commercial advertising, what we call branded content. You guys maybe know that term. And I do some work for NGOs around the world. So I do a lot of different things in nonfiction, in the nonfiction world of documentary. But what I love to do is make feature-length films. And that's why I'm here. So I want to talk about that process. And I think a few of the things that, for me, define what it means to be an independent artist and an independent filmmaker. It's funny to read the poster here, which is, Jesse Moss talks about how to be a successful independent filmmaker. And in a way, I'm not sure that I feel like a success, or sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And I feel like that is independent filmmaking. It's a real series of ups and downs and figuring out how to ride the downs and ride the ups. Because when you're an independent artist, you're not really working for somebody else, right? You're working for yourself. And that's always been really important to me. So that's why I chose this first image, because I think does anybody recognize this image? Do you know this film, Man on Wire? It's a great documentary. Philippe Petit on a tightrope and the World Trade Centers before they collapsed. But I think it's not only a great documentary, this story, but it's an image of what it means for me to be an artist and a filmmaker. And it's about taking that first step onto this wire, and which is sometimes the hardest step to take. Because once you're on the wire, and this is how Philippe talked about that experience, then you kind of find your confidence and you move forward. But I think often starting a new project, even if you don't have money to make the film, taking that first step onto the wire is what independent filmmaking is about. And that's hard. And even though I've been doing it for 20 years, it doesn't really get easier. But I can't stop doing it because I love it. Before we talk about some of these themes, I wanted to just share with you the trailer for The Overnighters. So this is a documentary that's about men, mostly men, in the United States who couldn't find jobs. And there was an oil boom in one state in the United States, North Dakota. And suddenly they discovered oil in the ground, and there was a lot of work and jobs. And so everybody in America who needed work went to North Dakota. And it was like a dream. People were looking for new lives. They were looking to support their families. And so they left their homes and they traveled to this very remote place. And this was an incredible story in the United States. And I wanted to explore it. I felt like the news media and journalists weren't telling the story that interested me, which was, are people who are leaving their homes and making this epic journey, are they finding what they're seeking? And I think one of the reasons that the embassy was interested in bringing the overnighters here to Ukraine is because of conflict and the internally displaced people who are forced to leave their homes to move somewhere else, and how they're welcomed or not welcomed wherever they find themselves. Because that's what the story that I told becomes about, is not the men who came, but the man who helped them. So that's why I ended up here. It's not the place I expected to find myself when I set out to make The Overnighters. But I realized also in coming here that it completes a kind of personal story for me, which is that my ancestors were Ukrainian, and they left this country 100 years ago. One to go to London, and one to go to the United States. And then they met, and here I am. So it's a kind of full story, a full circle of migration, of human migration. And so I didn't know what the story was going to be. I mean, that's what the kind of films that I like to make are not documentaries where you film interviews and you shoot pretty pictures and then you paste it together. Like, I like to shoot what we call, for lack of a better word, cinema verite, or observational or direct cinema. So filming dramatic moments in the moment with real people. Sometimes shooting interviews, sometimes shooting pretty pictures, but really focusing on drama, like present tense, dramatic storytelling, like we see in fictional film. So those are my models, but how do you do that in documentary? So the way I work is I like to work alone. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but just to introduce the conversation, I'll show you the trailer for the film, which is 4 minutes. And it's not the trailer for the finished film. It's the trailer that I made when I was making the film and trying to raise money, trying to raise support for the project. So I think it's like the most effective way to present a distillation or a summary of the film and its themes and its style of storytelling in 4 minutes. So I'll show that, and then we'll come back to this conversation. And at any time, if you feel like interrupting me or asking a question or making a comment, please, anytime. So I didn't have any money to make this film, but I felt like it was an important story. So I flew to North Dakota from my home in California. It's about 2,000 miles. And I went by myself with my camera, because I like to shoot. I didn't have a sound recordist. I didn't have a production assistant. There was no crew, just me. And I went looking for a story in this kind of epic oil field. I was looking for a needle in a haystack. You know that expression, right? Like looking for some human story that would illuminate this much larger story that was happening. So I met this man, and he's the star of the film.
Rambling around your city, rambling around your town, I never see a friend I know as I go rambling around, boys, as I go rambling around. My sweetheart and my parents I left in my old hometown. I'm out to do the best I can as I go rambling around.
If you can't find it here, you're not going to find it.
People with 10 felonies is getting $100 grand a year.
I'm just at the end of my rope.
It's a hard time. We've had people sleeping in our parking lot for over a month. They're waiting to come in the building. And we're a church. This is a place where sinners should come.
So I got a pretty good criminal history.
Anybody's afraid of the newcomers? Everybody's afraid. It does amaze me that giving people floor space is provocative.
My opinion is a violation the way this is written.
You're going to see people like me. We're going to be leaving.
I voted yes to have him stay here, but a lot of people reach a point and that's enough.
The people who tell me about the love of God, people eat 6 meals a day and live in a nice home. You haven't answered a single question about the several sex offenders who have lived in your parking lot.
Police just confirmed that they had found the body of Sherry Arnold, buried in North Dakota.
Suspects charged in the case admits they kidnapped Arnold and choked her to death.
On their way to North Dakota, hoping to find jobs in the booming oil industry.
Could mean the end of my ministry in Williston. Could mean the end of everything.
Only are free. Ain't that many? They all walk like with me. Just tumble in the breeze.
To be human is to serve, and to let the neighbor change your life.
As I'm supposed to be. No matter where the wander from post in between. From here to yonder, there's no place for them to name. Lonely are the free. Silent are the strong. Not so much as a whisper tells you anything is wrong. You know all along, but you can't.
Don't give in to despair, because hopeless should never win. And hopeless is a lie.
Keeps you hanging on until the silent signal and the breaking of the dawn. You're shadowed by the sadness in the sacrificial songs. Silent strong.
So before I talk more about the film, and for those of you who've seen the full-length film, it's probably interesting to see the trailer for it, and both how it does and does not represent what the final film became. But I wanted to talk about a few other things first. You know, the first thing I mentioned was with Philippe Petit and Man on Wire was risk. And for me, in my professional career as an independent filmmaker, I think the most rewards have come when I've taken the biggest risk. And when I've made the safest choices and the conservative choices. Those have not been the best films. And I have to remind myself that there's a kind of inverse correlation, or direct correlation really, between risk and the freedom and the independence and the success of what I achieve as a filmmaker. But in addition to risk, I want to talk about mentorship, because I think that was really important for me. I think we'd all like to think we were born brilliant filmmakers, right? Or maybe we went to film school and we could step out and make a masterpiece. And some of us can, but most of us can't. And for me, it was really important because I didn't go to film school. I didn't study film in college. I took a few courses on film history, but I decided that I wanted to pursue documentary film, and I thought the best path to do that was, well, film school was very expensive, and I considered it very seriously. But then I met a filmmaker who's this woman, Barbara Koppel, who's a great American documentary filmmaker, and in fact had made a film that was very influential for me in making The Overnighters, a great film that won an Oscar, an Academy Award, about coal miners in the state of Kentucky in the 1970s. It's a masterpiece of American documentary filmmaking. So I met her. I was 26 years old. I was working in politics and decided I didn't like politics and government, that I wanted to make art and I wanted to do journalism, but I wanted to tell political stories. And that the best form to do that, in my mind, was documentary film, right? Because it combines those things, art and politics and journalism. And sometimes it's more art, and sometimes it's more journalism, sometimes it's more political. But in the middle there, you know, I think there's an extraordinary form and possibility that's all of those things. And the films that influenced me were the films that did that, you know, where they were extraordinary stories, but they also were political and angry and journalistic, and they were art. So I presented myself to Barbara Koppel. I didn't know anything, but I said, I want to come work for you really for free. I answered her phone. She didn't pay me anything, but I got to see how she worked. And the great thing about documentary filmmakers is that they don't have big companies. It's usually just a few people. So you can really apprentice, directly with them. And so mentorship was really important for me. And it's not that she sat me down and she taught me how to shoot or how to do sound or how to make a good documentary. I just got to watch her work. And that was really valuable for me. I mean, I needed to decide for myself that this is what I wanted to do, but I wanted to learn from somebody who could do it really well. And so I spent 2 years working as a producer, first starting as a production assistant and climbing my way up to become a producer. And after a couple of years, I decided that as much as I liked working for her, that I had some of my own ideas. So I think mentorship, and you all have the tools you need to make films, and you probably have good ideas, but I wouldn't discount the value of mentorship, of deciding who makes work that inspires you, and go to them wherever they are and present yourself and consider working for them. I can't tell you how many times a student comes to me and they say, I want to work for you, Jesse. And I say, okay, have you seen my work? And they say, no. It's like the simplest thing, too, right? If you're going to go and pursue professional employment with a filmmaker, with a production company, make sure you know their work. And not only that, make sure you like it. And I think a choice that I think a lot of people face in the United States who want to pursue film, and I bet you face as well, is, can I pursue film, or should I go into television? Are they the same, or should I go into advertising? And these are related or interrelated worlds, but they're also very distinct and separate. And it's not always easy to move between television and independent film and advertising and film and television. So, I think it becomes necessary professionally in your career to be able to move a little bit between those categories if you can. But when you're starting out, I think it was important for me to commit to independent documentary filmmaking, which is what I knew I wanted to pursue. And now there's a lot more money in television. I mean, that's the case in the United States. That's where you can make a living. You can be an editor on a reality television show. I mean, there's just a ton of that work in New York and Los Angeles. Because television has money, and independent filmmakers, they're hustling. They don't have much money, right? So they can't pay you much. And there might not be work for a whole year. You might only work for 3 months. But I think with the sacrifice comes, a much greater opportunity and freedom. So mentorship. The second thing, or third thing, for me is, and I'm sure you're all voracious consumers of film of all types, right? Like, what's the last great film you saw? High Rise, okay, sure. Yeah. And anybody else? What film inspired you to make film that you saw recently? 400 Blows, a good one. Which one? Tree of Life, yeah, all great. I'll tell you a film I saw last year that was really, really intense, dark, but pretty inspiring, The Tribe. I don't know how you guys feel about that film, but I think for me the best films are the films that they might seem impossible to make, but they still inspire me to want to make films. So when I was younger, and I still watch a lot of documentary, but I think about the films that really inspired me to make documentary because they showed me what was possible with the form. And in particular, this great American documentary, which is about a very unlikely subject, men who sell Bibles. Okay, it doesn't seem very interesting, but it's a landmark film, an American documentary. It's extraordinary, and I think what it showed me was that a documentary film doesn't need to be about a political issue. It can have politics in it, but it can be about these human beings and their lives, and it can a filmmaker can take us into their lives and show us, with the power of a fiction film director who's written a script, life unfolding in front of the camera. And that's what I saw in this film, a movie called Hoop Dreams, if anybody's, another great American documentary. These films came, not this film, but Hoop Dreams came out when I was in my 20s. And I thought, wow, documentary filmmaking is narrative, right? It's not just agitprop. So inspiration, and I don't know about you guys, but I go through periods where I consume everything, and then when I'm making my film, I don't watch anything because I don't want to be influenced, or it's static, and so it's a kind of interesting process. But inspiration, I think, if you're interested in documentary, you need to be a voracious consumer and find those films and filmmakers that inspire you. So I got restless working for a filmmaker, and I decided, I needed to make my own films. And I had this idea from my childhood about this man who I had gone to my school, who had gone to jail, but decided to reinvent himself, to create a fictional identity, and to con his way into Princeton University, which is one of our great universities. And so this was an idea I had. I didn't know how to make a documentary, but I knew this was a great story, and I threw myself into it and enlisted my friends who I had met in New York to help me record sound, to do camera work, and managed to edit together something like what you saw, a little trailer, about 5 minutes of the film, and then based on that was able to raise a lot of money from HBO to make the documentary. But I will tell you, the film I made wasn't very good. It was a failure, actually. I was a first-time director. I was learning on the job, which is the best way to learn, but I was also learning with somebody else's money, and there was a lot of pressure, and I fucked it up. I didn't deliver a good film, and I knew that, and so I kind of as a way of coping with what I knew was going to be a failure, I started to make another film. And this was a film in which no one gave me any money, and I made by myself with my own camera, no crew. And I went to a racetrack in New York, a car racetrack. You guys have car races? Do you have the demolition derby? Do you know what that is? Where cars smash into each other? It's kind of stupid, right? Okay, well, I went to this racetrack, and I watched them do the demolition derby, which was funny and silly, but really violent. And I was like, what? This is weird. This is like a crazy spectacle. Why do these guys do this? And after the race, I went down to the area where the men parked their cars, and I met this guy. His name was Speedo. He writes his name on his car. And I just started filming him. And he was an incredible character. I mean, just funny and wild and charismatic and like a movie star, but no one had ever heard of him. He was just a guy at some racetrack who was crashing cars, right? And he was the best driver. He won every time, and he would get in fights with other drivers. And it was really visual, too. I loved filming the racetrack. There was a lot of action, but it wasn't really a film. And then I went home with him. He took me home, and he was married, and he had 2 kids. And he showed me around his house. And he said, yeah, I sleep on the couch. My wife sleeps upstairs, and I sleep on the couch. And I said, well, how long have you been on the couch? And he said, 5 years. And I said, okay, this is a story. They had a really bad marriage. His wife didn't like him. He didn't like his wife. They were splitting up. He was really angry. There was a lot of anger in him that he was taking out at the racetrack. But he was trying to be a good father, and trying to kind of live out his best potential, And at the racetrack, he could be like a superhero. And this was like amazing. And I just and he got to know me and to trust me. And it was just me with my camera, and I was just in his life, and I was just filming. And my friends were like, what are you doing? How can you spend all your time with this guy, this crazy guy on Long Island who smashes cars? And I said, I don't know, but I just find him really interesting. And my wife, remember, she looked at the footage, and she said, no, I don't understand it. And that was a good lesson for me, because I ignored her, and I kept going. I mean, of course, she supported the film, but you know, my friends, filmmaker friends, they didn't really see it. But I kept going, you know, and filming. And over about a year and a half, like, he left his wife, he moved out, he won a big championship, he got in more fights, and then he fell in love with another woman who he met at the racetrack. And it was like a beautiful love story. It was like the most unexpected thing. And I just found it by filming. And the film, I think I made it for about $50,000, which I don't know if that seems like a little or a lot, but it wasn't, you know, it was mostly money I was making doing other jobs. And I finished the film, and then I took it to a festival, and then somebody in television in the US saw it, and they bought it, and then a big movie studio saw it, and then they bought it because they wanted to make a big movie with, like, Will Ferrell as Speedo, and but the film was like a little success, you know, and it was a great lesson to me in, like, independence and not doubting myself, you know, and letting my instincts really take me. And so I think I've made 4 feature-length documentaries. And after Speedo, I felt like, okay, I can do this. I think I know how to do this. I'm going to start my own company. So I was doing other work that, you know, I wasn't very fulfilling, but I really continued to want to make this kind of long-form, immersive documentary. And I'll just briefly touch on this film. This was the film I made after Speedo. And I learned, so this was in my work. It wasn't really the first 2 films that I talked about, Con Man, about the imposter, and then Speedo, they're really character portraits. But they're not political films. They're character studies. And in 2006, the United States was engaged in the war in Iraq, which was going very badly. Many people were trying to understand how the war could be so confusing. You know, what were we doing there? How did we get there? And this was a question that I was wrestling with myself. And what I learned is that the Army, the U.S. Army in the California desert, had built like a giant stage set of Iraq. It was like 1,000 square miles large. And they had built sets, like movie sets. They had spent about $1 billion to build a fake Iraq, okay? And they had hired Iraqi Americans to be actors, to play Iraqis. And the purpose of this simulation in the California desert was that soldiers who were going to go fight in Iraq would go through the simulation and kind of learn how to fight a war. And except the bullets wouldn't be real, they'd be laser. But it was like a giant play, like a giant work of theater, like the biggest work of theater in the world, starring 3,000 US soldiers and 200 Iraqis and tanks and airplanes and helicopters and explosions and mannequins that bled blood. It was surreal, like a Stanley Kubrick film, like Dr. Strangelove, or like a Robert Altman film, like MASH. It was crazy. So we asked the Army, could we come and film? And they said, sure. I don't know why they said yes. But so my partner, I had a directing partner on this film, and we asked the Army if we could live inside the simulation. And they said, yeah, go ahead. We don't mind. So I moved into this. This was an Iraqi village, but it was really just made of like plywood and shipping containers. And we filmed a very immersive observational documentary following an Army brigade through the simulation for 3 weeks. So living and breathing 24 hours, 7 days a week, a simulated Iraq. And you know, the film is, I think it's pretty good. It's funny, it's horrifying, it's a little bit scary, it's a little bit absurd. And I think it was really, what was valuable for me was that it was a way of understanding and looking at the Iraq War, but in a kind of strange way, like looking at the war from below, or looking at it through what we would call a funhouse mirror, like a distorted reflection of the war. But something that revealed an essential truth about the war. I think that's what was important, is behind the absurdity and the horror and the humor was a truth that we could see in the eyes of the soldiers who were going through this, in the lives of the Iraqis who were helping the U.S. Army. And I really, the model for us, my partner and I, was not another documentary. And I'll tell you that, inspiration for me comes from great documentaries, but as much from fiction, as much from Terrence Malick, or Ben Wheatley, or other fiction directors, as it does from documentary. So for us, really, the inspiration in the film was Robert Altman. And I think that's important because, I don't know, do you guys know Robert Altman's work at all? He's a great American director and really a humanist and a great eye for the absurdity of American life. He made Nashville as maybe one of his most famous films. McCabe and Mrs. Miller, if you know that film, a Western. So just a beautiful American fiction film director of the 1970s. And I felt like people don't make documentaries like this. Documentaries are binary. They're black and white, good and bad, right? But I wanted to make a film that was gray, that was complex, that was funny and horrifying. And I feel like there's a lot of room in the world for those kinds of films because documentary is, it can be very formulaic. It can be very pedantic, very polemical, very conservative. And there are not enough funny documentaries. So this film, it's called Full Battle Rattle. And any of the work that I'm talking about today, if you want to see it, I'd be happy to share links, make them available to you for free. They're not, only The Overnighters is subtitled in Ukrainian, but I would be more than happy to share my work. So this film we finished, and we raised money privately from 2 investors and a little grant from Sundance. And then the film premiered at the Berlinale, and then we found various distribution around the world in the United States. So it was another great lesson in independence. It meant leaving home, leaving my family, living in this strange Disneyland. But you know what? It was really, really fun, frightening, and fascinating. So this is just this is an American soldier who's pretending to be a terrorist. It's very complicated how they would orchestrate this whole event, but it's like a screenplay. They write a script, except it's improvisational theater. So actors have not lines, but characters. Who here, I'm curious, who's really interested in fiction, film, or scripted filmmaking? Okay. And who's more interested in documentary? A couple of you. And commercials? Commercial work? Yeah. Okay. So it was like scripted improvisation. Really interesting. And that's just a production photo. That's me filming a execution. So they're cutting off somebody's head or pretending to. But these are actually U.S. soldiers who were play acting this execution of a terrorist or suspected sympathizer. And I wanted to show you this not because my technique is really good. I don't know that it is. But this is on-the-job training, right? And so how many of you probably all shoot, right? You all own cameras and you all shoot. You all consider yourself cinematographers? I'm untrained, right? I didn't study cinematography in school. I wish I did. But I learned on the job, and I learned by shooting my own movies. And there's no better way, I think. So that's how I learned to shoot. And it's remarkable how much I don't know. But I think it's also remarkable how much that doesn't matter, right? Because what matters is your eye, your instinct. Obviously, you got to get it in focus. You got to expose it, and you got to hold it steady, right? But the rest of it, there's some things that help. But I think, particularly with documentary, I think commercial work and narrative cinema, when you're obviously doing intensive lighting, it becomes much more technical and complicated. But for this kind of documentary work, I find it's so much more about your relationship to your subjects, your instincts, your ability to put yourself in a position when something is going to happen, right? And then to get it and not fuck it up, to make sure the camera's rolling. And then to have the knowledge that comes from understanding the grammar, not just of documentary, but the grammar of fiction film. And what do I mean by the grammar of film? Like, you know, what are the components you need to cut a scene together, right? What's the coverage? Is everything shot in like a static master shot? Or are you shooting master, reverse, overs, interesting angles? Are you crossing the line? All of that technical stuff, right? So the films, the nonfiction filmmaking that I like to do, if I'm filming a dramatic scene, I'm thinking about, you know, maybe we all are. We're thinking about what are the angles? How am I going to cut this, right? Or we're learning how to do that in our heads. And I think what's so challenging about and fun about documentary work like this is that you just have to be doing it in the moment. There's no chance for preparation because you don't know where the actors or the subjects are going to move. You don't know where the action is going to take place. You don't have the ability to direct your actors, to block them. You can't light the scene. So it's super dynamic, super, intuitive. And I love that connection that comes when it's you through the camera with your subjects and having to make those decisions and having to say, okay, you're cutting the scene in your head. So on-the-job training, I think, I guess my point here is that shoot as much as you can, shoot your own movies. I think there are things that cinematographers that I've collaborated with can do that I could never do. And sometimes you need that, right? You need to light in a certain way. You need somebody who can operate a stabilized camera. You need a helicopter, whatever you need. But I try to shoot as much as I can myself because I think that kind of on-the-job training and that self-sufficiency that it gives you to go out and make a film without waiting for somebody to give you support or give you money or come with you. So that's just a shot of me shooting the Overnighters. So I spent 18 months in North Dakota. I live in San Francisco, but I took 18 trips to North Dakota. I would stay for a week every month. And you saw that the story is set, I don't know if you could tell this, but the story is largely set in a church that pastor presides over. And when I went up there, I slept in the church with the men who slept there as well. And it's a very kind of immersive way of documenting what was going on. Yes? Yeah. 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 I think that's a great question, and I think that I guess the answer is that it's a kind of there's a constant tension between kind of your preconceived plan or your expectations or the kind of narrative that you're shaping based on what you've shot already and what you think might happen or should happen, and then what actually does happen, and so you're constantly rewriting the script. Not only that, I think direction in documentary is not passive, right? You're not just I hate the term fly on the wall, right? You know that term, right? Because documentary is not objective. It's so subjective. The relationship with your subjects, your interactions with them. It's not passive. It's active. And there's not, in journalism, there's a pretty clear line between, are there rules about how you engage your subject? But in documentary filmmaking, the great thing about it is that there are no rules, right? And so I guess for me, it's like I had like an overarching concept of what the story was with, say, the film about the Army and their simulation, right? I knew kind of the framework of the story, but I didn't know the characters until I landed on the ground. And then I had to kind of cast. I had to look around the room and say, okay, there's 25 people here, and you're all actors. Who's charismatic? Who's willing to go on camera? Who's got a good story? And that that's kind of it's like casting a film, and it's not the person who's maybe technically the best actor or the best looking or the most charismatic, right? It's a combination of all those things. It's like, and that's why you have to look through the camera, because it is about what the camera sees. Does a person do they hold your attention when you watch the screen? Like whatever movie, screen presence or screen charisma is, which is impossible to define, right? It's what you can't take your eyes off of. And you have to be able to look through the camera and identify that. And you have to cast your documentary. And that's not a dirty word. Like we use it to talk about fiction. We're going to see a bunch of actors, and you're right for the role, and you're right for the role, and you guys are going to be a couple, right? But it's about kind of going into that space and disarming people and getting to know them and watching them, and then it's about anticipating things that might be happening in their lives. I mean, you hope you have a subject who communicates back to you because, for example, Pastor Jay in The Overnighters, he was good about telling me when something might be happening in his life. Like he would say, Jesse, I'm going to do this. This is coming up, and he would call me or email. That's great, easy. Okay, I'm going to be there, right? Because you can't be there all the time, every day, all year, I don't think, right? So having a subject who's comfortable communicating with you or making sure that you're constantly reaching out to them. And I mean, I think also, really to get back to your question, it's like constantly, rigorously examining what you've shot, not just what you think you've shot, but what you've really shot. And that's why it's really, really important, I think, with a film like this that's shot over a long period of time, a year, 2 years, to start cutting. Not immediately, but start cutting and seeing whether the scenes you have stand up on their own and what they look like when you string them together and what you really have. And then not just what you remember or feel, but what your editor, who's not you, I think, for the most part, or someone else, thinks about your subjects and your footage. Because it's very easy, particularly when you work alone, like this, and you have an emotional investment in what you shot. Oh, I worked so hard to shoot that scene. I fell on my ass, and I had to do this, that, and But the edit room doesn't care about that, right? It just cares about how good the material is. So I think what I had on The Overnighters was I knew the money I needed to raise for the film was the money I needed to pay an editor to look at the footage, somebody who had kind of impartiality. My editor was also great because he came from a background of screenwriting. So we would, we're shooting documentary, and this is real life and unscripted, but we would look at the film structurally like we would map out a fiction film or a screenplay. That is to say, and it's conventional, but act structure, act 1, act 2, act 3, protagonist, antagonist, external conflict, internal conflict. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I can see it before I shoot it. Like I know a character has an antagonist, but I haven't been in a position to film them together. Or I know my character has an internal conflict, but I'm not going to ask him about it yet. It's like, so you're keeping track of these dynamics and these possible developments that may be part of your story map, right? And I think, in a way, that's the impossible question to answer, and I think is unique to every project and unique to every filmmaker, but it is a constant interrogation of your material and your subject and the larger structure of your story, because at the end of the day, it's a 90 minutes or 100 minutes of footage on the screen, right? And it's got to function like a story, or at least, look, you feel free to make experimental cinema or do something else, but I'm a kind of traditionalist in what I like to find and shape and create in my documentary storytelling. Like, I want human beings who I can identify with. Even if I don't like them, I want to feel like they're human, and they have complex emotions. And I want to feel like there's a story. What's a story? A beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And so I'm looking for those things. And, you don't always get cooperation, but So I mean, maybe we'll come back to some of that too. It's a really good question. But I guess I wanted to say about, I mean, I'd love to encourage more of you to pursue documentary filmmaking, because I really do think, and if you've thought, no, I want to make fiction, I think you can make nonfiction as compelling as fiction. Look, fiction filmmakers have been borrowing from documentary for a long time, right? The Dardenne brothers, and that style of neorealism. You name the filmmaker, right? But I think that I think that there is, and of course I've been here for a week and thinking about Ukraine and what's been happening here, and also the function of documentary in the United States. And I think the power of documentary, and it's increasingly clear, is that journalism, conventional journalism, is kind of compromised sometimes or limited. And this is true in the United States. Whether they're crassly commercial and passing themselves off as journalists when in fact they're just lazy and they cover celebrities, or they no longer have the resources to cover foreign events, or they don't, conventional journalism covers big stories in a particular way, right? They tell the same story. They all tell the same story. This is true in North Dakota, okay? So I was reading National Geographic, and they had an article about what was happening in North Dakota. This is their story. It's a pretty picture. It's a familiar story. Every magazine in America wrote exactly the same story. And do you know how they did it? They went there and they spent a couple days or maybe a week reporting. They talked to a few people, and then they left, okay? But I feel like what documentary filmmakers can do is you can spend a lot more time on a story. You can get to know people. You can see how their lives change over time. What we call longitudinal storytelling, like a long line of time, right? I'm not saying you got to spend 18 months shooting your film, but I think that it's clear that that's a space that documentary occupies, and I think that in a world in which there are real constraints on mainstream journalism, I think documentary can kind of fill that space and tell these complex stories in ways that we can relate to on very human terms, but still function as journalism. So just so in case you're wondering, in your mental map, what am I talking about? That's North Dakota. It's it's like nowhere. It's I don't know what the equivalent would be in Ukraine, but the middle of nowhere, right? No one lives there. It's empty. That's where I live, right there. That's what it looks like. So I think just to maybe come back briefly to story, and then maybe we'll take questions and stuff. But I guess when I think about my stories, first of all, I think about character. Who are these characters? Who am I, and how many characters can I follow in my film? Is there room for more than one? Is there, a Robert Altman film, like I mentioned, they're notable because they're 6 or 7 or 8 characters. But really, my feature-length documentaries have tended to focus on a single protagonist, one character, and a character in conflict, right? You can't have drama. You guys have studied drama, right? You've all read, theory on dramatic construction, right? So you can't have drama without conflict, without tension. And, you can, I guess you have to, I think you have to find it. I mean, you can know it's there, but it's one thing to know it's there and it's another thing to get it on screen. And I think that's where this kind of, somebody telling me something in an interview is not the same as seeing it unfold between two people. And this is a surprising scene. You saw it in the trailer, and those of you who've seen the documentary know that this is a reporter for a newspaper, and he confronts Pastor Jay, there are men in the church who are registered sex offenders, and the reporter is about to write a story about that, and he chases Jay down the street. And it's kind of a crazy scene, and I just kind of accidentally was in a position to film it. And in fact, I thought, this is such a compelling, strong scene that now I'm going to be able to raise money for this film. I'm going to go back, I'm going to show this scene to funders, and they're going to say, this is great, here's some money. But you know what? Like, I had great material, and I couldn't get funders to support the film. Because funders are, well, they're conservative, because they want to know how the story ends. And it's very hard to get this kind of filmmaking funded, fully funded, because the ending hasn't been written yet, right? It's by definition, you're in the middle of shooting it. You don't know what's going to happen. So try telling a funder, hey, it's going to be good, I promise. But so this was a very, you know, I made this movie, I started it about 4 years ago, and I'd made already then I'd made 2 feature documentaries, you know, track record. I couldn't raise the money for it. I got about $40,000 in grant funding, and that was it. And you know, it was really hard. Like, it really nearly destroyed my marriage, like my professional life. Like, I just had to put everything into it. But I knew what I had was special. It was so much time away from my home, but I knew this was an important story. And then finally, like, I think if you're lucky, you know, what you get is a character who comes to some understanding about themselves that they did not have at the beginning of the film, you know. And this film, The Overnighters, is really a tragedy. I mean, I think it takes a turn that's really wholly unexpected, was very unexpected to me. But I think that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking, you know, as I would in a fiction film, like a character who you meet at the most decisive moment in their life. And that's a lot of weight to put on a story, right? Can I really expect to find somebody at that moment in their life? Yeah. No, don't be sorry. Yeah. 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 You don't have a movie. Or you have half a movie, or you have 3/4 of a movie. No, I think you can't bank on that. And I think, you know, that's why you hedge your bets. You film other characters. You put weight onto other aspects of a story. You think, okay, well, how much transformation is enough transformation? Or maybe it's not. Maybe it ends up being about making a larger point that, you know, in which there are 3 characters, and each character embodies a different aspect of this issue. You know, maybe I've just been lucky in that 2 of the features that I've made have involved this transformation, right? But I think it's more that if you want to make that kind of film, you need to have the instincts to meet somebody who's both willing to give you that, but is put themselves in the position, or the kind of volatile and vulnerable position of going through that transformation, right? And I think it's like being receptive. Like when I met Pastor Jay for the first time, he told me, this is the very beginning of production. I went to his church, and it was a room about this big where the men were sleeping. And we started talking, and I said, oh, this is really incredible. You're helping these men. They're sleeping on the floor. And he said, Jesse, I could lose my job. He wasn't going to go through a kind of personal transformation, but he was going to lose his job, or he was going to get fired, or something bad was going to happen. Like I could just, you know, I could sense, it was clear. He even told me, right? So I didn't know, I mean, more happens in the film than that, but I think it was, so what I'm saying is you don't have to be a fortune teller, right? I think you just have to be perceptive about human beings and what, I mean, there are many, we could all probably cite many examples of documentaries that don't conform to this structure at all. They're fantastic and formally inventive, and, but this is not their model. And this is maybe more of a conventional narrative fiction model. But yes, yeah.
So you have a few secondary storylines, and in each you have moments of tension, moments of relief.
Yeah.
So it was like a coincidence that you have all this like fiction film, or you have
Yeah, so that's a good question too. So with the Overnighters, I shot maybe 5 secondary characters, and there are only 3 in the film, and 2 I just cut because they didn't resolve. And I think open-ended stories are okay too. But I only had room for a certain number, and I knew that I had 3 that did kind of make this full journey. And so there was a lot of protecting myself, and I filmed. Now, I mentioned. Let me just go back here because it's important. So this is my old mentor, right, who I worked for when I was young. And when I worked for her, somebody told me a story about her, which I have carried with me in my entire career, which is that when she was making not this film, Harlan County, USA, but another film that she won an Oscar for, another documentary, that she filmed someplace in a town in Minnesota for 6 months. And then she threw the footage out. Like, that is so much work, right? But she found the story somewhere else. She was there, she was filming for 6 months. How much money, how much film stock, who knows, right? How much pain, how hard did you work, how much time did you spend away from your family? 6 months, and she walked away from it, and she found another story. And that story is what she won an Oscar for. So it's like when I miss a moment, when I'm shooting a film and I'm somewhere and I hear something happened over there and I didn't get it, what can you do? You just have to leave it behind, right? And that's so hard to do, but necessary in documentary, really. Fiction, you can go back, and if you got the money, you can reshoot it, or you can add a day of production, right? Documentary, you're not getting it back. I mean, you can make up for it, right? You can make up for holes, but so that's something I always think about. And so with the Overnighters, not just these other characters, but there was like a young couple who I filmed in North Dakota, and I spent so much time with them. They lived in a campground, and they were very attractive and young, and I thought it would be an important part of the film, but they just ended up not being very interesting. But I realized later that I think I needed someplace to go. I just couldn't film my main character all the time, and I kind of needed it was more of a psychological outlet for me to have. And maybe, who knows, maybe their lives would have taken an unexpected turn and they would have found their way into my movie. So I don't think of that material as wasted. It's just kind of part of the mosaic, and it's but you do have to protect yourself. So this is just a recap of the Overnighters. Just 1-person crew, 80 days of shooting. So 80 production days, which by narrative fiction standards is a lot. For a feature documentary, I don't know, 18 months of production. And then funding, like I said, you guys know what sweat equity is? I don't know what the Ukrainian translation for that is. It's like just your work, right? It's like your time is money, right? It's like the time I'm working on my movie is not time that I'm making money doing something else. That's your sweat equity. Then I got $40,000 US in grant funding. And then when the film got into Sundance, big American film festival, we had a rough cut, and then some investors at that point were willing to loan us some money and then make an investment in the film to get us to that, which is, the film was really production was shot for about $40,000. That's just travel, hotel, renting a lens. But there's no crew to pay, it's just my time. So I think that's pretty low. That's probably, depending on your perspective, it's a little and a lot. And then this is really editing, sound mix, music, all that other stuff, right? And so that's the very hard movie to market. Those of you who are in the commercial space or also studying marketing would appreciate the fact that it's kind of it's a tragedy. It's very hard. It's also a story about a religious person. And in the United States, it's hard to market to particularly a movie that's about a pastor. It's it's not a subject that's really commercial. You know, people want sex or violence, right? They don't want like a guy in a church helping homeless men, okay? It was a challenge, and we had a really good American distributor, actually the same company that distributed The Tribe in the United States, distributed The Overnighters. They like kind of provocative films, so they had distributed The Act of Killing. Has anybody seen The Act of Killing? You guys know that film? It's a great documentary. It came out about 2 years ago about the Indonesian genocide. If you're really interested in documentary, I recommend it. It's formally very radical, but also really, really impactful as a film. So this was the marketing campaign. But who wants to go see a movie with that face on the poster? Not me, right? I mean, it was a challenge. It's just a very difficult film, but we opened in, that's the Nuart in Santa Monica in Los Angeles. It's great. Of course, it's a film that did really well at film festivals. Film festivals are great at delivering on audiences that have an appetite for tough documentaries, but if you want to open a movie commercially in the theater, like, you know, where people pay $15 on Friday night, it's much harder, which I discovered. So we didn't make much money, but we did really well. We were at Sundance in 2014 and won a special jury prize, and we did maybe 50 U.S. and international film festivals in theaters in the U.S., and then television around the world, and Netflix in the U.S. and internationally. So for me, a really great validation of the risk. I mean, I make these films to show them to audiences in theaters. Like, TV pays money, Netflix pays money, but the real value for me in the work is exhibiting it to an audience and talking with them about it. So it was really important to me that Pastor Jay participated in the public screenings of the film, and that was great. So, and I just wanted to finally say, like, this is, I want to talk about support. So you're obviously here in this program, and you have a supportive environment, and you have your colleagues. And I don't, you know, I've talked a lot about working alone, but my wife is my producing partner, and, you know, this kind of work without some kind of close support network would be just impossible. So she's been instrumental in every film that I've made, and and as I mentioned, having an editor too, not a big operation, but keeping it small, but having partners who are brave enough to tell you when you're being foolish or wrong, you know, even if you think you're right. So I guess that's all I wanted to say about being a successful independent filmmaker: risk, inspiration, instincts, on-the-job training, storytelling, and support. I mean, that's what seems important to me.